What is going on, YouTube? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review the debut album by Chamillionaire. Basically, this project is called The Sound of Revenge, and it came out in the fall of 2005. Now, this is a pretty hit album, mostly known for the hit single Ridin, which came out in the summer of 2006. It had Crazy Bone on there. It was just kind of a big deal. It had a Weird Al parody and stuff like that. It was just one of the larger songs of 2006 as that kind of went. But particularly like this album. A lot of folks, I definitely feel like this is a classic Southern rap album from the 2000s, I would have to say. But the problem with it is after this particular album, Chamillionaire kind of got like a cleaner image and kind of tidied himself up for his 2007 album, Ultimate Victory. And the singles on there was just a lot more motivating and just kind of a lot more like progressive as far as that kind of went. And his 2007 album just didn't hit as heavily when it came out, and then he just didn't really drop albums after that. But I'd have to say this is a pretty much classic. Like I was saying, this is a great album, just excellent all across the board. Tons of hits on here, tons of bops on here, tons of good stuff. There are three singles, despite the fact that Chamillionaire is kind of almost known as like a one-hit wonder. There are some other singles on here that I'm going to express and talk about just to kind of prove that that's not the case. It's just too bad that some of these just didn't really do as much damage as they needed to. It's kind of the concept about it. Definitely some good stuff on here. There's plenty of good things to talk about, and this is just an overall highlight to kind of hit. And like I was saying, up there with albums like King by T.I., Paper Trail by T.I., Young Jock's New Jock City, Young Dro's Best Thing Smoking, albums like that, the PSC album, plenty of those type ones. Lil Wayne's The Carter 2, Lil Wayne's The Carter 3, Rick Ross's Port of Miami, to some of those classic 2000s era kind of Southern to some of those classic 2000s era Southern albums as far as that kind of happens. There's just a ton of those, but I would have to say this is a pretty heavy hitting one, definitely. So I'm going to talk about the singles. There's three of them on here, and like I was saying, that they all hit pretty heavily, despite the fact that Ridin kind of got the brunt of like the popularity. But I do feel like Turn It Up is not anything to kind of underestimate. And I also feel like Grown and Sexy, despite the fact that this song didn't chart at all, is another highlight to kind of have, and just an extra kind of gem for the ladies as far as that kind of happens. So basically, Turn It Up has Lil Flip on there. This is a pretty hit single. This at least cracked like the top 50 of the Billboard 100, so not nearly as good as Ride, but it was a pretty good one. This is like a groovy, kind of superb hook, kind of Southern bop, I would have to say. It's a vintage 2000s rap staple. This is a vintage 2000s kind of rap staple, I would have to say, and it's just a nice vanilla club hopper. So it's definitely a pretty excellent one. Really like the hook on this particular song. Just overall does a great job. Chamillionaire and Lil Flip do a great job on here. This is a later hit for Lil Flip as far as I kind of went, just a few years after his popularity in the charts and that type of stuff. Just I'd say it's just a real staple, a great song to kind of get cranked to, have some drinks in your system, that type of stuff. Just a real vanilla club type tune by these days as far as I kind of went. This is pretty litty back in 2005, 2006. This was pretty litty back in 2005, 2006, but I just had to say this is an overall vanilla one that just hits pretty heavily even today. So I'd have to say it's a good feeling as far as that kind of happens. Just some nice bops on here. The hit single Riding is the second single. This is probably one that most of folks have probably heard at this particular point. Just a real hype kind of this is just a real hype hit song out of 2006 and probably one of the more notable rap songs of the 2000s. I'd have to say this is just one that carries a lot of energy, just a great cruising song as far as that kind of happens. This is basically like a manic kind of hype energy hit number one single. I'd have to say it's got a superb hook and overall feeling about it. And it's just this song is just a good summer stretcher and it's a very illy song. I'd have to say Crazy Bone and Chamillionaire do an excellent job with this particular one. This has some real manic and affable kind of energy. This is very infectious. This carries the vibes extremely well. This is a real summer tune that you can listen to from like May all the way to September as far as that kind of happens. It's some great energy, just has that real affable kind of feel. It's just really works pretty heavily. Just a real nice one. I mean, this is one, like I was saying, that's notable from the 2000s and continues to have that energy even today. Is what I have to say. Is just, I mean, it's too bad that Chamillionaire couldn't top this song. I mean, he does have other hits. I feel like all three of the singles do excellent, but this is the one that got the brunt of it. But I just wasn't. This was kind of a huge ringtone song. This was a lot of This was a lot of folks' ringtones back in the day. I would have to say, but it's just kind of the concept that, despite the fact that this is probably the song that got the brunt, I wouldn't sleep on the rest of this album because there are some other ones. Even if it doesn't have the widespread kind of commercial appeal of this particular song, there are some other hits on here. One, for example, is the third single, Grown and Sexy. This is definitely a nice one. This is kind of an underrated follow up single to Ridin', I would have to say. This is kind of an underrated follow-up single to Ride, and I would have to say it's a great ladies song in summer weather stretcher. I would definitely have to say. So this is just a very nice one. Just has that affable kind of energy. Just a great hook on here. Just a great kind of overall hangout type vibe that just has some good tunes. Just some good overall melodic vibes for the ladies as far as that kind of happens. It's just really surprising that this song just didn't do better. I mean, folks were just so hype on like the energy of Ride. This song kind of got vastly ignored, and really it just didn't chart at all. I want to say I don't even know if it charted on like the bubbling under 100 singles from the Billboard 100. Just really kind of struck out as far as that kind of went. But it's really too bad because Chamillionaire just really didn't really get the chance to really outdo Ridin, but he did have the singles. All three of these are pretty hooky. Chamillionaire does the hooks on these songs, and they are all pretty syrupy and just ready to go in terms of southern rap. It's just too bad this one was just underestimated, but it is a nice one. I do recommend it just to kind of realize that this was the third single and it was the approach of it if you just want to know more about Chamillionaire than just Ridin. That's kind of the concept. So not counting the intro and the outro, there's 14 songs on this particular album. And out of those 14, I wound up recommending 12 and a half. Basically 12 songs plus 2 almost songs. There's 14 songs on this particular album. And out of those 14, I wound up recommending to you 11 plus 2 almost songs. There's really only one song out of the whole 14 that I don't recommend. So this album is going to get a 10 out of 10. But the only song I don't recommend is just Southern Takeover. Basically, just didn't like the production composition of that particular song. It's just trying to be like a marching kind of triumphant kind of one, like an anthem, but it just didn't pull it off that well. It just felt like that was the only real dud on here. But everything else is basically recommended. The 2 almost songs would be In the Trunk and Void in My Life, and I'll go ahead and talk about those. So basically, In the Trunk is kind of like a factory productive like bubbler. I would have to say it's a mild party starter, definitely, and it's a solid cousin of Ridin. I would have to say it's just got an overall manic feel. The thing about this song, I do like this song a decent. I do like In the Trunk a decent amount, but I just didn't really like the production on there quite as much as I would have liked to. It's just kind of one, it's pretty much one of the album's weaker beats, I'd have to say. It's a decent part. In the Trunk is a decent party starter. It has a decent kind of factory kind of beat on there, but I just kind of feel like it probably could have been turned up a little bit better. Maybe on the energy of like Frontin' or Ridin' or some of those type ones, or Peepin', maybe some of those type ones, or Fly as the Sky, definitely. This was kind of somewhat meh as far as that kind of happened, but still it's an almost song, I'd have to say. And then Void in My Life was a really surprising one. This is another one that's kind of an almost song, but I still do like it a decent amount. This is kind of an anguished, Void in My Life is kind of an anguished, kind of regretful tune, I'd have to say. It's a personable hit, definitely, that helps round out the album, I'd have to say. And it's just overall some workaday hate. So this is kind of a makeshift one. Chamillionaire does have some makeshift kind of songs on here. I feel like songs like Think I'm Crazy and Rain and Picture Perfect are definitely some ones just for some of that kind of after hours malaise, just especially in like the day after hours, just kind of getting done with class and work and some of those type things as far as that kind of happens. It's a real workaday haze as far as that kind of happens. Void in My Life, definitely like that one. But the concept about it is I just feel like the production's a little bit, I don't know, it just has more of a learning curve than what I was thinking of at the particular time. I think I would listen to it, but I just don't know how oftenly I would listen to it when hearing it like a shuffle or something like that. So it's not one of my first picks, but it is a good tune to kind of have to round out the album. So this album does definitely get a 10. This is kind of an almost song as far as that kind of happens. But to talk about some of these, probably one of my more favorite songs on this particular album would be No Snitchin'. This is definitely kind of a malaise southern charmer, I would have to say. It's a hustler's kind of workaday feels that this song particularly kind of has, and it's just a late day kind of wind down music type tune that I feel like is pretty good, and it's just a cool off kind of song. Definitely feel like the concept of it. This is another kind of malaise one. I would definitely have to feel like this the concept of how some of these kind of happen. There's a ton of these kind of on here that are just kind of more evening after hours as far as that kind of happens, but the topic of no snitching and stop snitching was pretty popular in like 2005, 2006. So it's just kind of a candid extra topic to kind of have and stuff. It's just kind of a more wind down type music as far as that kind of happens. Not really like a party type tune. It's just kind of more just unwinding a bit as far as that kind of goes, definitely. But a really nice one on here that gives off some excellent vibes is Fly as the Sky, and this has Lil Wayne on there and Chamillionaire's brother with Sock, so I definitely like the concept of that. This is an electro kind of white hot beat. I'd have to say the lyricist on the song completely destroy this one, I'd have to say. Has a great Wayne verse on here, and this is an overall illy kind of song, so I definitely like this one. Great album cut. Like the fact that Chamillionaire had his brother on here. I want to say he was on some of the mixtape Messiahs and stuff like that. It's just kind of the concept, just being able to see that sort of thing. Definitely feel like this is Southern Charmer as far as that kind of went. I want to say that Manny Fresh produced this beat, which is pretty dope as far as that kind of goes. Just a real kind of nice electro hopper. Just really good job as far as that kind of went. Probably one of the album's best songs, I'd have to say, especially in terms of energy. This is a good follow up to Ridin' and a good one to kind of pair up with that and like a mixtape type feel as far as that kind of goes. Kind of a good song to pair up with Grown and Sexy would be Peepin' Me. This is another highlight, I'd have to say. This is a syrupy, kind of seductive ladies boiler. I'd have to say it's an easy nightclub haze, definitely. It's just a great stock album cut, I would feel like. And this has an overall, this song just has an overall killer hook. So it just has a real kind of Egyptian-like, kind of syrupy type beat that just works pretty damn well. Just a real, this is a real nice seductive one. This works overall as like a nice charmer to kind of have. This one and Grown and Sexy are just two good bops to kind of have in that sort of sense. There are some more ladies songs on here. It's just a good concept, but this is definitely one of the more highlighted ones in terms of just laying game and some of that type of stuff, I'd have to say. But Picture Perfect, if you like beats like Rubber Band Man by T.I. and some of those type ones, I feel like Picture Perfect's a good one. This definitely reminds me of something Texas oriented. This is kind of a summery outside vibes kind of song similar to Rubber Band Man by T.I. Like I was saying, this is just some good Texas vibes and it's just UGK similar. Makes sense that Bun B is on this particular type song. Basically, it's pretty much like a UGK type song, I'd have to say. There's a lot of songs that Bun B was on in 2005 that just were odes to UGK. There just were a lot of songs that Bun B was on that were odes to UGK, and this is no exception. It's just another good highlighted one to kind of have. Definitely some good concepts. Too bad that Pimp C wasn't on the song, but he was in prison at the time, probably. So it's just kind of the concept as far as that kind of goes, but it is a good highlight. And then Rain's a pretty nice one. This is like a malaise type one. This is another makeshift type song. Rain is another makeshift type song, like I was saying. This is a good evening, day after hours haze, I'd have to say. It works as good. This song works as good wind down, kind of workaday malaise, I'd have to say, and it just gives the album character. So this is a good one. This has Scarface on there, which is Rain has Scarface on here, and that's a pretty good catch for Chamillionaire just off of his first album as far as that kind of happens. If you don't count the color change and click albums with Paul Wall as far as that kind of happens. If you don't count the color change and click albums with Paul Wall as far as that kind of happens. So some good stuff there. Radio Interruption's a pretty nice one. This is like a glazed kind of syrupy hangout gem, I'd have to say. Just to note, this song has some great overall kickback energy, I'd have to say, and it's just some PlayStation music and snacks kind of music, I'd have to say. Just hanging out at a buddy's house, something like that, having the snacks, having the sodas, the Coca-Colas, that type of stuff, the Pepsi, the Burger King, some of those type moments. Just some overall kind of barbecue type music, just to kick back, smoke a few swishers, some stuff like that. Just PlayStation type music as far as that kind of happens. Just some good tunes as far as that kind of goes. Really like the kind of affable kind of energy. This is kind of an awkward one just because this song is just called Radio Interruption. It's not too many song topics in that sort of format, but it's just kind of an original type one that just kind of wins as far as I kind of have. Definitely like the concept of it. And then Think I'm Crazy has Natalie Alvarado on here, who's a pretty good hook artist and R&B singer. Definitely like the concept of those two making a song like this. It's pretty good. This is like a story song about ladies. I'd have to say it's a heavy-hitting topic. Definitely the chick on the song has AIDS. It's a concept. You don't learn that till the end of the song, but I'd have to say it's still a pretty good one. This is just a vanilla malaise type song and just an overall ruminating gem. I'd have to say it's a kind of good one. I mean, it's a good one in a sense, but it is a story song, so it's not one to just kind of kick back to and get cranked to as far as that kind of happens. Just kind of a ruminating type one. It's good that Chamillionaire kind of tells some stories on some of these songs. He does have more to say. He's kind of like he's a productive rapper. He's not always in a nightclub and in a dance club and some of those type moments, but there is some extra kind of stuff to kind of have on here just to kind of have some of these extra moments. And Think I'm Crazy is kind of one that has some characters. That's a good one. And then Frontin's kind of a pounding evening times thriller. I would have to say this is a good smoke a few cut, definitely. It's just a lyrical gem, and this is synthy bop with some energy, I'd have to say. This is a good one. This is kind of like a cousin of Ridin', I'd have to say. This is another good one to kind of have, and just like the sense of some of these pounding type ones where Chamillionaire cranks up the energy a bit and just kind of gets a little bit furious, lyrical furious as far as I kind of have. It's just some good manic type ones to kind of have in that sort of pitch. I feel like Ridin', Frontin', and then like there's another one that I'm forgetting, Turn It Up or In the Trunk are all some ones to kind of have for some of that. And In the Trunk are all some ones for that crazy sort of pitch as far as that kind of happens. So that's basically the album. The only real song I don't recommend, like I was saying, is this Southern Takeover. The concept of it, this album gets a 10 out of 10. I'd go ahead and have to say about the social score. I'd go ahead and give the social score like a 9.5 out of 10. I feel like there's some real good bops on here. There's some real good bops on here. I just question the degree as to how much people care apart from the hit single Ridin' Dirty as far as that kind of happens. I do feel like there's some other singles, but it's just kind of the concept that for the most part, most people are just kind of blind to the fact of paying attention to most of the rest of this album. I want to say this album did eventually go platinum, but for the most part, even nowadays, most people, when they think of Chamillionaire, it's just the song Ridin' Dirty. So it's just kind of the concept about it. He does have other hits, and this album is proof of it, but I just give him a 9.5 just because the other singles just really did not compare in terms of like commercial appeal. I mean, this is definitely a classic album. I have to keep saying that this is a classic Southern album, classic 2000s rap album. Did a lot of things right. It was just the fact that most people are just pretty much blind to the fact that this is that's the only song that they really pay attention to. But there's some other hits. So that's kind of the concept. In terms of the future, like Chamillionaire has kind of been here and there. He kind of drops EPs and stuff like that, and he's dropped the occasional mixtape and some of those type things, but he's not as active as he was in like the 2000s and the early 2010s, which is kind of a shame because once again, this is a classic album. I am going to review more Chamillionaire at some point, more of those mixtape messiahs and that type of stuff. But yeah, I definitely have to highly recommend this, especially just past the song right. There's way more hits than just that song.